What's up, guys? Casino Crime, of course, here. And before we get the video started today, I came across a quote in an email I'm on from somebody I really admire. His name's Ramit Sethi for www.iwillteachyoutoberich.com. If you guys haven't signed up for his email list, you probably should. A lot of valuable info that he gives away for free, and his products are really good too. But nevertheless, what I wanted to do is talk about this quote today. As always, I like to start off my lessons and my videos with a quote. And this one says, if you don't invest in yourself, then why should anyone invest in you? If you don't invest in yourself, then why should anyone invest in you? And the reason I think that this is important, it's applicable to poker, especially to a lot of people who are in the training community, who are looking to improve their games and move up in stakes is, I see this all the time, right? Players write me messages, emails, hit me up on Skype, and they say, hey man, your products are too expensive, or hey, do you want to do a profit for coaching or coaching for profit arrangement? And this is always a big red flag for me, okay? People who want to basically get all of the fruit without any of the squeeze, or any of the juice without any of the squeeze, so to speak. And this is one of the reasons why staking arrangements is so hard. Several years ago, I was completely staked by a friend, right? And I learned through being staked that being staked is hard to do, or finding good horses is difficult to do, because it's hard to find the right type of horse that has an investment in the game, right? That actually has some skin in the game, that they've invested in their some actual money, and whether it be resources, books, or coaching in order to improve their game. The problem with finding horses is that a lot of times they're sort of free rolling the backer, right? And so that's a red flag for me to stay away from people who don't want to actually put some of their own skin in the game. So right now it's a good time for you to reflect on your own poker game and even your own life. Do you have some skin in the game and something that you really want to achieve? How have you invested your time and your resources into something that's important to you? So I think that's definitely true for a lot of poker players, or they're trying to find ways to free roll their way into making more money, but realistically it does take a big time investment and a big, typically financial investment, emotional investment in order to achieve your goals. And I think that you guys are starting off on the right foot by watching videos and committing to the community here. So anyway, thought that was fun to talk about. Enjoy the video. Let's get to it. Good luck. Hey, what's up, guys? Casino Crime, aka Jumbo Prey here, and thanks again for checking out this week's video. Apologize in advance, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I might be doing a little bit of sneezing or coughing during the video, so excuse me in advance. But today I'm excited because we are finally doing the last episode of this series here, which is called How to Beat 25 PLO. As you can see, as has been the case in the last few videos, we're playing 10 cent 25 cent and one table of 25.50 cent on Bovada, and we've talked about a lot of important topics, right? We've talked about developing reads against our opponents when we don't have a HUD, when we are brand new to the table and we don't have reads on the other players. We've talked a lot about different adjustments on a variety of board textures. We've talked a lot about adjusting at various stack sizes. And we've talked a lot about the general strategy and approach that goes along with winning at a significant clip at these stakes. So today we're going to wrap up a lot of those topics. We're going to expand on what we've already talked about. And hopefully we're going to beat some ass in the last, 30 minutes or so of footage we've got here. So I'll fast forward to the minute mark that I've got here that we left off at. And right into the action, we've got a hand in the top left where we isolate ace, queen, 10-6 with a queen high suit. This is actually a good opportunity to talk about pre-flop opening ranges, 3-betting ranges, and isolating ranges, and how all of that is dependent on where you are where you're at the table. A common question that I get is, should I open a hand like this in full ring, or should I open a hand like this in 6-max? Or how good is this hand overall, right? Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about overall hand structure and what we're looking in a starting hand and go from there. So we see that, well, the three things that define a hand are suitedness, connectedness, and high card value. Of course, the more suitedness and connectedness and high card value you have in a hand, the better your hand is. Ace, ace, king, king, double suited. Very nice connectedness, very nice suitedness, and of course, very strong high card value, which is why it's the best hand in 4-card PLO. But of course, we don't get dealt that every hand, so it's important to look at the other components of our hand and evaluate it from there. So how good is ace, queen, 10, 6 with a queen high suit? Well, it depends on the situation. Is this a good enough hand to open from under the gun in a full ring game? No. The more handed, the more players there are at the table, the more nutty your hands need to be. When we're out of position, it's important to have nutty hands, especially in multi-way pots, so we can be more confident of our draws before we commit more money. And, it's important to have typically more big cards at full ring tables from early position as well. Now, this is an easy open from the cutoff and the button in any game, whether we're playing 200, 400 against Phil Ivey, Zygmunt, and Isildur. I would still open this from the cutoff. Okay? But in stronger, higher stakes games, I think that it's a pretty easy fold from under the gun. Even from middle position, it's a close open. Depends a little on who's behind us. Of course, if we had tight players behind us, then I would have no problem opening that from middle position. But in general, this is a hand that it's not strong, but it's strong enough in many scenarios. In this scenario, is it good enough to isolate with? I believe so. We've talked about in previous videos that none of these guys have really shown any type of propensity to play back at us. So I kind of subscribe to the philosophy that until players begin to fight back at me, I'm willing to put in a lot of aggression. And at these stakes, I think that many players are still trying to figure out what the hell they even have. So it's okay to, be looking to play some pots and assume that you can apply a decent amount of pressure before anybody else is willing to fight back. They'll kind of let you know when you're beat, sort of thing. So I think that isolating this is certainly fine. If the button 3-bet us, I would have folded. And if it would have came 4-way, or if there would have been 4-way multi-way action, I probably would have played it pretty straightforwardly. The truth is that I would have preferred to have seen us c-bet the flop. I'm not really sure why I didn't choose to. Maybe I was thinking that my image was bad and that against two players on this kind of board that I would always get peeled. But I think that actually just having overcards and a gutter is enough to c-bet on this type of board. So I would have liked to have seen me c-bet here. My sizing would have been, let's see. Yeah, my sizing would have been 450. We give ourselves a good price on the bluff there and allow ourselves enough room to barrel profitably. And I think we can balance that with having some strong hands in our range as well. Somewhere in the $4.50 to $5 range. If I had complete nothing, let's say that I had, well, let's see. Let's see if I had ace, jack, 4-3 double suited, I would have just given up. But with overcards and a gutter, I think it's enough equity and good enough relative position to actually c-bet profitably in that situation. So, but as played, we actually do turn the gutter and bet for value and probably get 2 folds, I would imagine. The reason I say that I'd imagine that we'd get 2 folds is I think that this player would have led at least some of his straights. A lot of times you'll get peeled here by 2-pair and an open-ender, 2-pair and a gutter type hands, but or of course a worse straight. But he decides not to. Here on the bottom left, I would imagine we check. Yep. It's a good looking flop in the to some players, I guess. We have like a gutter and a backdoor flush draw, but it's still pretty trashy, so I would just be looking to check fold. You know, if I had like a backdoor nut flush draw or something, like let's say that we had like, let's say that that nine of spades was changed to like an ace of hearts, that in a three-way pot, I would actually very strongly consider donk betting that. There's some good barreling opportunities. I don't expect to get raised very much, and we have the backdoor nut flush draw. So that makes a big difference. But here, you know, we don't have a backdoor nut flush draw. Well, we do, but it's not a nut. And our hand's just pretty trashy. So, and it's certainly like I've said in previous videos that, you know, my general approach in four-way pots is to play very straightforwardly, and you're gonna see me do that here. And I think that that's pretty good advice. You see a lot of players lose a lot of they bleed a lot of just kind of needless bets by stabbing in like a four-way pot on a board that they just can't win. The boards that are pretty terrible to stab without any equity or blockers are these types of boards, right? The like Queen 7-4 two-tone. If it's four-way and you just like kind of mindlessly stab with no real plan on later streets and no real pot equity to speak of, you're kind of lighting money on fire. Interesting here, you know, we flop a pretty nice wrap on the ace 5-4 two-tone, and we have a backdoor flush draw, so I think it's a great spot to donk. You know, it's a limped pot, and we covered this concept a little bit in the previous video, but it's important to look at the board texture. You know, in general, like ace king x boards or king queen x boards, or just like that quote unquote heavier boards in general are bad boards. Bad boards in the sense that people connect with those boards a lot. But, you know, in limped pots, people's, or I should say players' ranges become a lot lighter or more heavier in like low cards. So big boards honestly don't scare me as much in like limped pots, or certainly like, I mean, single raise pots, it's the same, it's true as well, but you know, people tend to limp a lot of junk. So the ace high boards, you know, are less likely to connect with those ranges. So I think that donking here is good. You get a lot of folds, and it's rare that we get raised, which is nice. And in general, whenever I'm looking to like bluff or semi-bluff or continue aggression, one of the things I consider the most is even the hands that beat me are, you know, or I should say, are the hands that beat me going to play passively? And I think in this situation, it's just very unlikely we're going to get raised. So betting is good because it allows us to both win the pot immediately, or, you know, allows us to get there when we don't, or if we don't. So, we bet. And I guess I just checked because two players called me. I think that if one player called me, I would have always just, continued betting. And frankly, like, I think that, I would have liked to have seen myself just pot the turn. But I guess I just got scared because there was two players. But I think that both of these players have pretty wide ranges, and that should actually be a pretty good scare card for both of them. So, I actually like potting the turn. I think that would have been better. But as played, like, we just check fold. I think it's good. That might have been a river, even if even if we got called on the turn, that might have been a river we could have won on if we would have shown a little bit more courage on the turn. So, not happy with how we played that one, but it's a good one to talk or to learn about nonetheless. Looks like I'm auto-calling, limping on the button. We talked a lot about limping last time. I'm not going to cover it too much again, but basically I think it's okay to limp this behind. As long as you're not investing a ton of money when you flop something mediocre, then I think it's okay. Standard fold on table 3. With position, I would still call this the king 7-8-5, and I would imagine I do. Not going to peel my gutter on table 4. At least, God, I hope not. I mean, I said I was going to try to play some spots, but it doesn't mean I'm going to try to play terribly. In the cutoff, king, queen, jack 3 with a king high suit. Again, like, my overall strategy in 6 max is to appear as loose as possible while playing as tight as possible, if that makes sense. And I think that just playing as many hands as possible from late position is an easy way to give yourself a loose image without for a cheap price. And that's really what I'm looking to do in most situations is purchase a loose image for the cheapest price possible. Normally, I say that this is the best c-betting opportunity when when you have the pre-flop initiative and you're second to act post-flop. But here, I guess I just decided to check because we have no equity. It's a board that connects pretty well with the other two players, so I decided to check, give up. And you do need like a checking range here. Although, like, I probably c-bet here 80 to 85% of the time. I think this is the type of hand that I kind of start checking. On the type of hand on this type of board that I do start checking. 10-10-7 two-tone, no blockers really, no straight draws, no nothing. So it's okay to just check give up sometimes. Okay, we get a limp behind here, up on the top left with Queen Jack 9-4 double suited. And I mentioned a moment ago about sort of like aimlessly stabbing around at dynamic boards. This is a pretty good example of where old John probably used to lose like a bet or two, but new John is in his older and wiser days. My wife says as a married man, checks behind the Queen Jack 9-4 with the 9-high flush draw, which I think is a good play. I don't know, 5-way. You're probably not going to get too many bets through. And it's okay to like check back and just get there, right? We could turn like an 8 of clubs or something, call a bet. That'd be nice. Or like the best would be like a king of clubs. So I think that checking back is a good play. Unless you play, I would only bet the flop unless you were going to like bet and fire more than one. And honestly, I don't really plan on doing that on many runouts. Bottom left table, we open Queen 10-4-6, double suited, but pretty junky hand, obviously. This is the quintessential like trouble hand. And I honestly think, I've kind of highlighted the fact that this is the best c-betting situation in all of PLO when we have the pre-flop initiative and we're second to act post-flop. That's when you typically want your c-bet percentage to be the highest out of any situation, but I think that there's a good argument here for a check, and here's why. One being, I've mentioned that when the SPR is like, 8 to 15, you really want to avoid situations where you're putting in a bet, or even worse, like playing for stacks, and you're either flipping or you're fucked. And this is like a good example of that, right? Like if we get check raised, someone either has like ace jack XX, a set and a gutter, or something like that, and we really don't want to like get our money in against just like really super strong draws. Like if they have like king queen 10 with hearts, we're in terrible shape. So it's better to like check and maybe call a bet from the button, check and like turn a heart and bet for value, and just like kind of allow ourselves to get there. This is a good situation where, or a good example of, you need to have some kind of hands that you can check here. Like I would never check ace 3. I would never check ace jack. I wouldn't even check ace king queen. But those are a lot more like clear like value betting hands where worse hands can call us, and like draws are unlikely to raise us because we look strong. But like if we had ace queen 10 with like even like if it was a 10 high suit, I would still bet it because we have like an ace blocker, a blocker that a blocker to hands that can fight back against us, and we're just a lot less likely to get check raised. But here I think because we have no blocker to value hands, we have kind of like a poor flush draw, it's okay to just check and allow ourselves to either get there or get more information, or maybe even make like a smart check fold if the right action happened. So I would like to see myself check. If I had king queen X with nut hearts, I would bet. Even like bottom 2, I would bet. But this specific hand is like, I think it's a really great checking hand. If it was a heads up pot against these players, I would bet it. But in this specific 3-way situation, I think it's a good spot to check. Looks like we get away with a bluff, so that's nice. And you can kind of tell, like, I've taken advantage of a couple of pretty good bluffing situations in this game. And it's really when, like, players are just kind of checking and giving up. Again, like, don't make it hard on yourself. Like, typically, when at this level, when players check, they're weak and they're planning on folding, or when they bet big, they've got a strong hand. So don't make it harder on yourself than it needs to be. So on table 1, we raised pre-flop and got a caller. Flop is Queen 8 Deuce Rainbow, very dry flop. We have top pair, 2 backdoor flush draws, and a backdoor straight draw. C-bet the flop and get called. I would just barrel again. I mean, there's an argument to be made for checking back, but again, like, this is a turn I would prefer just betting. I don't know why I checked, but if it came back again, I would prefer just betting. This is a turn that's better for our range than it is his range, and I think he has to have a very specific combination to check raise us. So I would have preferred to just like bet again and check the river. I don't know why I checked, but he ends up like rivering up a straight. Here we flop top and middle on an 8-9-7 rainbow board, and I'm assuming just check fold. I mean, these are the boards that are pretty much like the scariest in multi-way pots. Somebody has 10-jack just so much. 10-jack is, besides ace-ace, 10-jack, besides ace-ace and king-king, 10-jack is like pretty much the most frequently played combo amongst players at any level. Players love jack 10x combos. So the 7-8-9 rainbow boards, especially in multi-way pots, are pretty bad to put any bluffs in on. Pretty easy open on table 4 here. You see me like pot opening. I think it's okay, but I kind of would prefer to just see myself bet like 3x. I think that would be more consistent with like what my normal sizing is. C betting on table 4 is fine. I think that checking back is certainly an option as well. Again, like we're sticking to the flipping or fucked theory, and not to say that our hand isn't strong. Like we have but it's really non-nutty, and it's not like a big pot hand. That's kind of something that you can ask yourself when you're deciding whether to c-bet or not, especially with like these medium strength types of hands. Like, do I want to play a big pot with this hand? I mean, in a 3-bet pot, this would be an easy like bet stack off. But in a single raise pot, when the SPR is a lot higher, I think it's closer. I think that we can certainly check behind, induce some bluffs on spade runouts, or even if like the turn is a 5. You know what I mean? So I certainly think it's okay to check here as well. We get a very strong hand in table 3, where we have ace king king 4 with the nut suit, and I'm assuming we just like re-raise to get it in. And on table 4, this is a pretty good example of what can happen when you start to inflate the pot early on with a hand that isn't really a big pot hand, especially against good players, right? I like to think about how many streets of betting my hand is worth, and then once you figure out how many streets of betting it's worth, you can take the line that correlates with like which line keeps your opponents the range the widest. So like here, I think that on most runouts our hand is going to be worth 2 bets. So I would prefer, I think overall, for us to like check back the flop and call a turn and a river bet, rather than bet the flop, bet the turn and check, or like bet the flop, check back the turn and call a river bet. I think it's better to just check back and call. It'll keep our opponent's range the widest, I'm pretty sure. I would probably just fold on table 4. Hopefully I did. Maybe I decide not to. As played, on the bottom left table, we don't suck out, unfortunately, but that's okay. Our opponent shows the straight on table 4. So we decide to ISO with ace queen 3-4 with all hearts. It's not the best ISO, but these guys have been playing pretty straightforward, and anyone who limps the cutoff is typically a weak player, so I don't mind it. If players were if there was like a small blind that was particularly 3-betty, I would prefer limping, I think. But in this situation, I think that isolating is an okay play. Here on table 2, we flop the nut blocker and a gutter and an overpair. So I would prefer to just bet. I don't think that our hand is like strong enough to check back, but we do decide to check back. I guess it was a misclick. Or it looks like we timed out, I mean. Kind of an odd spot. Maybe I should like turn it into a bluff and raise now. Looks like I just call, hoping to get the showdown. He checks. I'll probably check back. And our opponent has 2-pair. So would have like, my default there would have certainly been to bet the flop. If our hand was a flush, honestly, I would have been a lot more comfortable checking it back. But since it wasn't, I think it's just better to like bet for value, essentially, and prevent ourselves from getting bluffed later on. Seeing some random hands, nothing really playable. Folding away the garbage, this is good. Playing nitty, of course. We limp or just complete with the ace-6-5-4 with a nut suit. So top pair and the non-nut wrap. I think it's an okay spot to check call. I mean, I don't really want to like bet and build a pot necessarily, but our hand would have been strong enough to check call. And here we just pot. I think that like I actually like my sizing. I think that a lot of like 2 pairs and flush draws will like incorrectly call. So it's a good spot to like just pot it for value, especially like when pots are this small. When the SPR is this high, players' ranges widen a lot. So they certainly don't want to like just fold for 75 cents. So it's okay to just pot there. And in a lot of like limped pots, that will be my sizing. It's just a pot. Players' ranges are pretty inelastic. Pretty easy spot to ISO on table 4 with king, queen, queen 9 with a suit. Pretty easy spot to 3-bet on table 2. Not going to spend too much time talking about it. Just, short stack opens and we get it all in with double suited kings. Not much to say there. He has 3 aces. And I don't think we suck out. Nope. That's okay. Pretty standard though. And you can see like again like my limping behind theory. Just trying to see some flops in position with a lot of these guys that are weaker players, which I think is going to be plus EV for us. We flop a gutter and the nut blocker. I think it would have been an okay spot to like just like bet when check to and just look to like barrel off on a lot of runouts. But I think as played, it's fine to just like give up to a bet. I don't really want to push somebody off of what is clearly a strong hand. Here on table 2, we have a very strong preflop hand with ace, king, queen, 10, 3 double suited. We decided 3-bet, which is standard. It's really a poor flop for us, given that it's different if like it's a lot different if he had opened the button and we like 3-bet from the small and he called. Then this isn't as bad of a flop. But facing your normal cutoff range from a normal player, just like this is a poor flop. It should really connect well with his range. So I decided not to put in any money with like not to bluff at it, which I think is pretty wise decision, honestly. It's just a board that connects really well with pretty much any cutoff range. And we're going to get to see what he has. And he just has jacks. So I was not exactly right, but I think that that's a pretty good overall strategy. That board should really connect well with almost any player's ranges. We get very strong kings and decide to 3-bet, which I think is pretty good. I mean, this would be a spot where it would be nice to have a HUD. Against like an Ubernit, I may choose to just call and keep in worse hands behind me, and prevent myself from getting 4-bet off of a very strong hand, or like building a pot against like perceived aces. But 3-betting like this strong at kings is typically going to be a pretty good play against even tight ranges. And certainly a good enough hand to play for stacks with top pair, an open ender, backdoor straight draw, and 2 backdoor flush draws. So my standard here would be to just bet call. And like with these stack sizes, this is the like never fold, never like betting and folding against any player type board. Another very playable hand, 8-7-6-5 with a suit. Again, like we're talking a lot about pre-flop hand selection, pre-flop starting ranges. This is a good example of a hand that would be pretty poor from early position or under the gun in a full ring game. But in a short-handed game, it's pretty standard open under the gun. 8-7-6-4, yeah, it's probably closer to a fold. 4-6 or 4-5-6-8, I pretty much always fold under the gun, but I open those from the cutoff. Flop bottom pair and a gutter, and just decide to jam it. This guy has top set, and I don't think we win. Nope. Pretty standard post flop though. Although it's like a pretty bad flop for us. We're pretty much like getting called most of the time. But with although our gut shot is not nut, we do have a pair, and he could fold sometimes. So I can't imagine like check folding being good. So just decided to rip it in. And I think it's probably okay. It's not great. Not thrilled about it, but not too many other ways to play it. Well, again, like table 3, pretty standard, opening and c-betting. Kind of how you're going to print money. Great bail card. Oh, I didn't see that we didn't reload, so it makes it a little bit different. But if it was 100 big blinds, I would have just opened and c-bet and barreled like I did. Okay, so let's slow it down here a little. Make sure I get the action right. So, on the top left table, it looks like we had a button limper and I raised with double-suited kings. Nice double-suited kings, which is good. Table 4, if you guys are wondering if this could ever be a limp, it could be. I think that actually this is a hand that is overvalued in some situations. Like it's a great hand to 3-bet it. Most ranges. I prefer to 3-bet it rather than like raise out of position for a single raised pot. And I don't think it would be like the worst check anyway. Like here we raise and we kind of build a pot out of position where players have some room to maneuver against us and they can make pretty smart decisions. So I actually wouldn't mind just checking, although our hand is very strong. Here on table 1, like I said, we raised and got 2 callers with very nice double-suited kings. I think checking is an option. We don't really want to bet and get raised, that's for sure. And I kind of like checking because it keeps players' ranges the widest, so we could like induce some bluffs, which is nice. But I really don't want to get bet and get raised. I think that checking again is okay. Allows some stabs, again, like prevents us from getting raised off the pot. Although it's unlikely against players who are this straightforward, I think. It's certainly a possibility. And I don't think that our hand is worth I don't think that it's worth like playing 2 streets against for like big bets. Like if 2 big bets go into the pot here, we'll probably beat. And I think that he bets the river and I either call or fold. But I certainly wouldn't hate like just folding because I don't think that players really bluff here. Especially against someone who limps the button. They've got overall passive tendencies. I think that actually folding is pretty good. Maybe I call though. For educational value. But I think that folding would be just fine. People just don't bluff here. From my experience. Looks like I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, motherfucker, he checked the flop. Wouldn't he have bet a boat? But, again, like, the overriding factor here is I feel like people just don't bluff here. They just don't. And it's clear that I have something. And then when I'm facing big river decisions, that's kind of the thing that I weigh the most, what does it look like I have? When it looks like you have something good and someone's willing to bluff you or willing to put in big bets, it typically means that they've got something good. Yeah, it's too bad. So, interesting line that he checked back the flop, and I think that's what ended up getting him paid was that he did check the flop. I thought that he was representing basically exactly pocket nines, but again, as a rule of thumb, the best advice I can give is when it looks like you have something good and players are willing to put in sizable bets, it's especially at these stakes, it's typically a poor play to call. And I think that also what was important in that hand was that he limped the button, so he has passive tendencies overall. Therefore, he's unlikely to just go crazy with a bluff, especially on that board. Where players are most likely to bluff is in single raised pots in position for one street, not for three streets. If it's a single raised pot in position, I would say 95%, 98% maybe of players, especially at these levels, are very unlikely to just unload the clip for three streets. But, if it's one street stabbing, even two streets stabbing when checked to, they're very likely to do so in single raised pots. But they're very unlikely to do so for big bets. So we have top set, table 4, very nice. I think the checking is okay. Again, I am more likely to lead strong hands in multi-way pots than I am to go for a check raise because people see betting ranges really narrow in multi-way pots. They're kind of subscribe to the same philosophy I described earlier, where they play more straightforward in four-way pots. Here we have a gutter and a flush draw. It would be an okay spot to lead as well. But it looks like we check. Interested to see what we do. I mean, with his small kind of weak sizing, I don't mind check raising. Get a lot of credit on this board. I don't think it would be so bad. Maybe we decide to check call, we'll see. I wouldn't hate check raising, I don't think, with his sizing especially. Looks like we do call. Pretty terrible turn. So we'll probably just check fold. Check, check. River's a king. Check, check, I would imagine. He wins with a backdoor flush. I would normally call here. With the queen, jack, jack, 9, yeah, I mean, some decent check raising opportunities. Decent implied odds. Again, it would help if I had a HUD and I could get a little bit more of a read on this player's tendencies, but that's okay. Interested to see how I played this hand. I mean, I think that check calling is probably the best play. I don't really like donking. Looks like that's what I picked to do. I'm not going to lie. I'm not very happy with how I played this entire session, but at least there's some good spots to learn from. I think that check calling would have been the best play, honestly. A lot of players won't be very barely on this texture at this level, so we can get to showdown pretty cheaply by just check calling and seeing if we get there and evaluating. So, yep, this is one certainly terrible outcome for just donking, is that this can happen. So, yeah, I mean, here on table 4, this player's 3-betting range, I'm sure, is pretty tight, so I'm not going to go crazy with pair and a gutter. I'm just going to fold, I would imagine. Looks like we did just stick it in with queen, jack, jack, 9, which is not a good play. but that's okay. We open 10-10, 6-4 with a 10 high suit from the cutoff, and no one calls. I think it's an okay open pretty much at any stake, honestly. 10s are good because they also have good straight blockers post-flop. I like 10s and jacks combos. Not just because, they can, in single raise pots, their oversetting value goes up, but also because they have good straight blockers on a lot of different board textures. Standard fold on table 1. Pretty nice hand to open on table 4. Which we do. Get called in 2 places. Flop an open ender and set draws. We see bet 2 into 245. And if I got check raised, like I'm certainly, especially with this stack size, I'm just going to go with it. Again, next time, sorry about the non-auto top-up, fellas. But we're still getting used to the site. I think for the next session, I'm going to play either just heads-up tables. I was thinking about doing like a heads-up series, which I think would be pretty fun. And we can start at like 50-cent dollar or 1-2 or something. Maybe we could even start lower if anyone's interested in that, and look on like building a roll at playing heads-up. But I prefer to play on America's Card Room because I actually have a HUD on that site. So here we have top 2 on a straight possible board, but I think on this flop it's still good enough to just go with, certainly like with the SPR with that other player, which I would imagine we do. He has bottom 2 and we win, which is nice. Like on those types of boards, they're a lot different. Like a 9-7-5 is a lot different than like 9-8-6 because of all, there's like many more straight possibilities on the other board I mentioned. On the board we just played, I mean, he can have a lot of like pair plus gutters, pair plus wraps, like worst 2 pair and stuff like that. So it's a much different board. C-bet on table 1. And take it down. Open on table 3 with king, queen, 10-3 with a king ace suit. I think this is a pretty standard open in a 4-handed game, absolutely, from the cutoff. I would only fold it if the button was extremely aggressive. We open table 1. Looks good. Just a board that I would always c-bet. We decide to check back. Not sure. I guess like I decided to check back because he called from the small, but I mean, you should pretty much be c-betting this board 100%. I'm not sure why I decided to check. It's possible I was losing focus, but I mean, in general, it's better to just c-bet that board, even against players who are just calling from the small. I think I just assumed that he had more like ace X and king X type hands. But my standard would be to just like bet that 100%. We open ace 10 8 6 with a nut suit on table 1. Flop 3 pair. And if it checks to us, I'm still going to bet. I know that there's a straight possible, but I think that, again, like these guys are pretty straightforward. It's unlikely they're going to check raise me with just a... So we see I decided to check back again. Like, I prefer betting, honestly. Looking back at it, I think it's much easier, it's much easier to play with the initiative and knowing what you represent than it is to, check back. And basically, I feel that if we check back, we are committing ourselves to like losing the hand. And it just makes it so easy for players to bluff us. We take 7-9 out of our range. There's a lot of different runouts where our opponents get to realize their equity, and it just makes things easy. Like, I think that we have the best hand often enough that we are probably value betting if we just bet the flop. So I would have preferred to just bet the flop rather than check back. And we can see it, like it, you know, although we were essentially getting free rolled on the flop by the other player, I still prefer betting. Interesting that the other player had aces. Flop middle set on 10-7-3 rainbow. Player c-bets, or we c-bet, and he folds. Have a very nice ace, king, queen, deuce with an ace high suit on the top left table. Open and get called by the big blind. Single suited kings on the bottom right table. Open from the cutoff. Flop pretty nice. On table 1, I think that actually, like, checking would be an option on table 1 just because it's very difficult for him to have anything. But of course, like, checking looks pretty strong, and since we're going to be betting that flop so much, it's important to have some value hands in our range as well. We flop an overpair and a gutter on deuce 9-7 two-tone. I think it's good enough to play for stacks with against this player. But if he check raised, like, I would probably just call. I think it's people who check raise that flop are going to be very set heavy. I prefer to just call in position. And, we've only got about 5 seconds left in the video, so I think it's a pretty good stopping point. Wow, we covered a lot of stuff, right? Some pretty poor play, but also I think that we played some hands pretty well. And we covered a lot of the most important concepts for beating and crushing 10-cent, 25-cent PLO. And I think that a lot of the concepts that we covered are good for also, like, just low stakes in general. My overall philosophy with the low stakes is that 50-cent dollar is where you start to see a lot of, like, more thinking regulars, but there's not too much of a difference between, like, 25-cent, 50-cent, and 10-cent, 25-cent. And I think that that's why, like, in future series, what I'm going to do is focus kind of on, 50-cent dollar and 1-2 are enough alike that we can play 1-2 and 50-cent dollar at the same time and focus on the skills that are needed to, like, beat that level, and then we can go like 2-4 to 5-10. But as always, let me know what you guys think, what you'd like for me to go over. If you want to submit a video, I can go over that. A few of you have done that, so appreciate it. I'm going to certainly get to your videos in the near future. I also was thinking about making a heads up series, so let me know what you think of that and at what stake you would like me to start at, so I can begin making some content there. Love to see your comments and the discussion in the forums. Keep it coming. As always, appreciate you guys checking out the videos, so give me a shout, casinocrime@PLOquickpro.com. Good luck, guys. Take care.